Welcome to Built to Win, the podcast created to help you level up your business game by developing a success mindset made for the long run. In this episode, Why Happiness Matters, Neora's Deborah Heisz and Dave Fleming talk about Neora's sister company, Live Happy, founded by Jeff Olson and Deborah in 2013. Deb explains why happiness and success go hand in hand, how to use it as a fundamental guiding business principle, and gives tips for starting your own happiness practice. She also tells how you can observe the International Day of Happiness on March 20th.
Right, well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us on the Built to Win podcast. Today is a really special episode, and it is the month of March. We're going to talk about why that's such a special month and why we're so excited with our guest today. My name's Dave Fleming. I'm your host for this episode, and with me today is a very special guest that we're going to be talking about happiness. And you might be wondering, what does happiness have to do with entrepreneurship and leadership? And the correlation between true happiness and success might be more directly linked than you've ever realized before. My guest today, and also co-host of this podcast, is Deborah Heisz, who is the co-founder of a company called Live Happy. And it was founded on this idea that people can choose to be happy, but you have to know how to do that. And so, Deb, it's always a pleasure to work with you. And I'm super excited about this episode because I think there are a lot of people out there that probably don't know what Live Happy is, even though there's a massively successful podcast on it, 6 million plus downloads at this point and growing every single day. But first and foremost, like, who are you and what is your role with Live Happy? And let people know, like, how does this relate to what we've been doing?
Well, Live Happy is a passion project of mine. Jeff and I got together to get started working on it really in 2013. We launched a website called livehappy.com. It's still active. It's still, go there for all things happiness. We have the Live Happy Now podcast. But for me, I came out of the world of personal development. Prior to working on Live Happy, I worked on a magazine called Success Magazine. And I was a constant reader and a constant consumer of personal development content, as was Jeff. And what we really discovered was there was this whole offshoot of a psychology called positive psychology, which is the study of using psychology and applying it to help well people thrive. So it's improving your personal well-being. So you measure success by, does the individuals or the communities or the group well-being elevate? And the group, a positive psychologist, was referring to it as studies in happiness, which it is, but it's not in our general, we're happy because we won the lottery, or we're happy because we, won the race, or our kids did really well. It's not that fleeting emotion of happiness. It's really the happiness that you get when you're living the life that you're supposed to live. One of the definitions I've heard that's one of my favorite definitions is happiness is the joy you feel when striving towards your potential. So for me, it's huge, right? It's the joy you feel. And we all feel that. We find that moment we're in flow, and you find that moment that everything is it feels good to be doing what we're doing, no matter how big or small the problem is or the project is we're working on. We find that moment of flow. And that really is the joy we feel when we're striving towards our potential, when you kind of get lost in the work, when you look up and you're like, I've been working on this for 3 hours and it felt like 10 minutes. We can't be ready for the next meeting yet. I'm still enjoying this. Or you don't want to leave it, or you think about it all the time, whether you can help it or not. It's the joy you feel when striving towards your potential. And this is deeply connected to what we think of as personal development, which is always about goal setting and things like that, things that you're looking for. But it's really beyond that, because it's a scientific study of things that make you happy. And by happy, once again, we mean live a happy life. And, these are things like attitude, connection, relationships, huge piece of your happiness, meaning, creativity, gratitude, spirituality, mindfulness, health, finding ways to be more resilient, giving back. These are all things that if you work on these, the studies show us that you'll be happier. And it's really impactful when you think, hey, I can do simple things and actually improve my overall well-being in life. And more importantly, I can teach other people how to do that as well. I always found personal development wonderful and exciting and meaningful, but I always felt like there's a certain segment of it is, really people kind of making stuff up and talking, this worked
Yeah.
for me, maybe it'll work for you. So to have the science behind it really made Live Happy a unique project, and one that, I dove into and I feel like has brought meaning to my life. So in general, it's content to help you live a happier life that you engage in or you listen to or give you ideas. And it's great to be able to be a part of sharing that with the world.
It seems like obviously a really rewarding business to be in a part of. Tell us a little bit more about like the history, like why did you and Jeff Olson, that is the co-founder of Live Happy, why did you feel like this was something you had to do and get out there? Obviously, you talked about personal development, that's a passion of yours, but was there more to it at that time? Was there a bigger need, or was this just born out of that passion project?
I think it was really born out of the fact that we could point at a segment of personal development, which is happiness, and point at actual facts and data and studies that were done that are showing that this makes a difference in your life. In fact, there's so many studies that show the benefits of happiness on your health, your relationships, everything, that if you can work on this, it's kind of the precursor to everything else. If you can find a way to work on your happiness, and we're not talking about, I think we've all at the point in life where we know that toxically positive person. Great, I just broke my foot. It's all good. We're wonderful. We're not talking about toxic positivity. I really want to create that differentiation when we talk about happiness. We're talking about meaningful happiness. But people who are happy have stronger relationships, greater social networks. They practice better habits. They're more emotionally fit. They have better stress coping skills. They earn more money. There's a great study by Robert B. Swastiner and Ed Diener talking about how people with the same jobs, the person with a more positive outlook and a more higher sense of well-being, earns 30% more in the exact same job than their less happy counterpart. It's a precursor to success. It's not something you get after you're successful, right? Longer lifespan. Happy people live longer than less happy people. Stronger heart, stronger immune systems, lower blood pressure, better sleep. All of these benefits you get by working on your positive emotions, your positive outlook on life, are things we all want. And it was kind of revolutionary and very revealing to me, and I know to Jeff, to discover that happiness precludes all of these things. And we were benefited by the fact that we got to meet Dr. Martin Seligman and got to know him very well. I'm still on some boards with Dr. Martin Seligman. He's the father of positive psychology. And he is not, if you meet him in person, he is not someone you would accuse of being toxically positive. I assure you. He comes across as kind of a morose, older professor type who, is a little gruff in his ways. But it was meaningful for me to meet him because it really puts a face on, oh, this is a scientific study. These are things that actually work, that you can prove work. And for me, so much of personal development may work, but the evidence wasn't there. And so having an evidentiary trail would say, oh, this works because, and here's this study. That made it really meaningful to me.
Yeah, tell me a little about it. It feels like, maybe this is just, I'm just more aware of it. It's like one of those things where you don't realize it's out there until you start seeing it out there. But is there more research now than there has been on happiness, or is that a recent phenomenon, or has it been out there for a long time?
Yeah, Dr. Seligman stood up at the American Psychiatric. He was the head of the American Psychiatric Association. Right about 30 years ago now, I'm not going to get the date right, but it was about 30 years ago, and said, look, it's time to stop looking at psychology only as a way to help sick people get to a normal state. We need to apply these principles to help well people thrive. So that was his mission, and he drove that through psychology. And out of that was born an organization called the International Positive Psychologists Association. And their first meeting was in 2011. So, or maybe 2010, but it hasn't been very long that this has truly become a study. This has truly become something that's out there. So even though people have always kind of known being more optimistic is good for you, it really hasn't been a professional study up until the last 15 years.
Tell us more about, you've been involved in this for I guess about 10 years now. what have been some of the things that you've seen come out of this in terms of like whether it's the research or whether it's the practical application, like what is Live Happy helping people do on a day-to-day basis?
Well, one of the things when we established the company, we had all these connections. We started building these connections with positive psychologists who were studying it. And scientists are really good at talking to each other about stuff. They're really bad at taking what they're studying and putting it out into the real world. So this was kind of our niche. We're going to take all of this great information that's there for the taking, but nobody knows about, and give it to people so they could learn about it, right? So that was a really, really big thing for us. But some of the revolutionary breakthrough things for me, and some of the earlier things that were really found at the beginning of the study, are things like happiness is a choice. We all go through life thinking that we're either happy, sad, that she's a Pollyanna, she's a negative Nancy, whatever it is. We all give these labels. Oh, that's just how they are. But the reality is only 40% of how happy you are is based on your DNA. Yes, it plays a part. If you're someone who is, predestined to feel a little more pensive or a little more anxious or whatever, you're not, you are. Somebody else isn't, right? Somebody else is just a more natural risk taker. That exists. But only 40% of whether you're happy is made up by that genetic component. Another 10% is environment. So if you think about it, for most of us, our environment is our home, our office, going to the mall, whatever it is. Our environment can have an impact on our happiness, but unless you're living in just abject poverty or in a war zone or under the threat of, let's just call it what it is, if North Korea, right? that environment only plays about a 10% role in how happy you are. So if 40% is genetic makeup, 10% is environment. The other 50%, now this comes from a work from a woman named Barbara Fredrickson, but the other 50% is choices you make on a daily basis, things you can do to be happier, things you can do to improve your overall well-being. These are things that you have control over. So that's one of the things I think that, most people don't realize. And if we can just get most people to recognize that, no, you're in charge of how good you feel, of how you're living your life, not somebody else. The world isn't happening to you. One of my favorite phrases is, if you're not working on yourself, the world's going to work on you. Happiness is a way to work on yourself, focusing on things you can do to build your resilience, to build to improve your attitude, to be healthier. All of these things can have a positive impact, but there are things you have to do, and they make up the 50%.
For most people listening, I've got to believe that that's probably news to them. Like that environment is only 10% of your happiness. So if 50%, and I mean, like, I love that. I love the idea that we are in control of our happiness, but that probably comes as no surprise to anybody who's listening to this podcast, is that we believe in taking control of our destiny, and that it is possible to make those correct decisions. Maybe not correct, probably not the right word, but making decisions that lead to something positive. So if I'm sitting down and I'm coming to you and I'm like, okay, Deb, you're the co-founder, CEO of Live Happy. I'm interested in being happy. What are some things that I could do on a daily basis? You mentioned like happy acts, and you mentioned some things, some principles that people can do. Can we dive into that a little bit, like in terms of the practical application of like, how do we go about this? Like maybe I am negative Nancy, and I've got to overcome that 10% or that 40% that's my DNA. What do I do about it?
Well, there's a lot of things you can do. In fact, we have what we call these 10 practices, which is the list I read to you earlier. And those are 10 things you can work on. But the key is picking out the one or two to work on at a time. Please don't try. Anybody who tries to change a habit, you can only change one, maybe two in a 3 or 4 month period. So don't think in terms of, I'm going to do it all, because you'll just fail, right? No one can actually change everything in a short period of time. But there are habits that you can adapt and things you can do to immediately begin seeing results. And when I say immediately, I mean within 30 days. one of my favorite is the practice of gratitude. So anybody who listens to the Live Happy Now podcast knows that the host, her name's Paula, and I talk about gratitude a lot because it's really impossible to be grateful and jealous at the same time, right? Or grateful and envious, or grateful and feel like you're being shortchanged in life. If you work on your gratitude, it will improve your overall well-being and how you see the world. In fact, there's been some studies shown that if you focus on finding good things, so if you train your brain over a period of time to look for something good in life, you're going to improve your happiness. And if you do it, you're not going to go back to your earlier set point. So what do I mean by that? So if you take the time for 21 days to look for and write down 3 things you're grateful for every day. So today you started, you haven't done it before, you're doing it, and you're going to do it for 21 days. Studies show us that 6 months after you stop, you only did it for 21 days, you still have a more positive outlook than the day you started. So it's really important to look at it from a standpoint of you're training your brain to look for the positive. So when we talk about writing down three things you're grateful for, I have 3 kids. I can't just write their names down every day and say I'm grateful for them. That doesn't work that way. The way it works is I'm really glad that Zach finally put away the dishes after making his own breakfast. That's good today. Tomorrow it's got to be something different, right? Or thank goodness my children finally folded their socks. Okay, that's good today. But you have to find that gratitude in there. It's not just, it's not tongue in cheek. You actually have to take the time to feel grateful and to think about it. And if you do this for a while, it will improve your overall well-being. And so that's one of the things I like to talk about people doing. Another one is, and this one's difficult for a lot of people. Who here has been told to have a more, or who listening has been told to have a more positive attitude? Like just go have a more positive attitude. That's easy, right? Just go do that.
Yeah, just suck it up. Like yeah, exactly. Like just put a smile on. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
We all know it doesn't really work that way. But what does work is doing something along the lines of say yes to more things. In fact, challenge yourself to anything anybody asks you to do for a period of time. Say yes. You may hate it, but by saying yes, you're engaged in an activity to pull you out of whatever funk you're in, right? The ability to say yes opens up possibilities. It opens up the idea that good things can happen. Whereas if your answer is always the de facto no, if your brain first says no to when somebody calls you up and goes, hey, would you like to go? No. That is a negative attitude that reflects out. But if you say yes, but I can't do it this week, I can do it next week, it becomes a more opening, engaged conversation. And that comes to work too. I mean, one of the biggest things I think biggest mistakes people make in their work environment is only doing the things they know they can be successful at. And so they choose to not do something because they're scared. You just did a great podcast with Amber on this. You choose to do something that you're scared you're going to fail at. You don't do it. So you push right up to the edge and then you don't do it. Well, if you're only ever doing things that you know you're going to do really well at, if that's all you're ever doing, it doesn't feel real good. It feels safe, but it's not positive. Sometimes that failure, that taking that next step to do something you can't, something you maybe wouldn't ordinarily do or you're not very good at, is the step you need to take to cross that hurdle into believing in yourself more. Because a lot of time attitude issues are you just don't have the belief. A lot of attitude is creating belief. So that's one thing on attitude. Say yes more. Take on the challenge that you didn't think you could do. Just go ahead, give it a try. If you fail, everybody fails. It's not a big deal. The other attitude thing, I think, and most people don't really think about this that much, but they should. Mind what you put in your head every single day. So if what you're doing is turning on the negative news as you drive to the office and then you get home and you're driving home and you hear the negative news and you get home and you put on CNN and you put on Fox News and all you see is people screaming at each other all day, you begin to believe the world is a bad, negative place. Mind what you put in your head. I want you to be informed about what's going on in the world, but don't dwell on it. You don't need 18 different opinions about the murder that happened 30 miles from your house. That genuinely has nothing to do with you. But that's what people invest their time and energy in. The True Crime podcast is massive industry. Is that something good in your head? No, but it's entertaining, but it makes you think the world is a much scarier place than it actually is. So be mindful of what you're putting in your head, of what you're listening to. Put good stuff in your head. I think, Jeff, co-founder, one of the things he always talks about is spend 10 minutes a day listening to something good, or 10 pages a day of reading something good. Just put good stuff in your head, and you'll find over time your attitude will change, not instantaneously, but over time.
It sounds like, and not to be too self-serving here, but we did do an episode on the slight edge not too long ago. And it sounds like not like, in all honesty, it sounds like you can slight edge your way into a better outlook on life and a more positive outlook on life. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. It's true. None of these things are difficult. None of them are difficult. They're all easy to do, but slight edge, easy to do, easy not to do. And you can slight edge your way to a more positive outlook on life, feeling more grateful, feeling more resilient. You can slight edge your way to all of those things, which all lead as a precursor to success. I always like to say, people always think when they get the house, the spouse, the job, the car, they take that vacation, whatever that is what's going to make them happy. The reality is, let's say you did win the lottery tomorrow. And let's say you bought the house of your dreams, and it's a mansion, and it's beautiful, and it's gorgeous, and you love it. And in 6 months, it's your house. You're no longer getting joy from an inanimate object. You may feel good about it, but it's not the same thing as relationships with people, or earning things, or going outside your comfort zone to experience new activities. All of those things are things you should be doing, because it isn't the acquisition of stuff that will make you happier. But on the flip side, if you are happy, you're more likely to get all of those things. Not more likely to win the lottery, let me be really clear here, but you're more likely to get the house, the spouse, the job you want. No one wants to hire, the person who is fearful or who isn't enthusiastic. Everybody wants to hire the person who wants the job. No one wants, let's say you're in sales, and I know a lot of the people listening to this podcast are in sales for their primary source of income. Do you want to buy from someone who's like, "Oh, here, you might like it. Give me a call if you do." Or do you want to buy from the person who's like, "You know what? I tried this. It worked for me. It was great. It was fantastic. I think you're really going to love it." Which purchase are you going to more likely to sell? And it's really hard for the second person to be that way unless they're genuinely that way, because we can all see through stuff. We see through the fake. We may not realize it, but we see through the fake. So the goal is to genuinely become the person that you want to be, not fake your way there.
That makes sense. So, and you mentioned something, because we live in a country where we are, I don't want to say overly consumeristic, but at some point, like, it kind of feels that way. And so is there, like, can go back to that section where you said, acquiring things doesn't make you happier, but is that true? Like, is that, like, does it kind of a little bit? Because I know, you get
momentarily,
like, for me,
it does,
like, it's nice. We like stuff.
It does for a moment, but then we start taking it for granted because it's a thing. So there have been some studies done, and I'm going to tell you, this is an old study, so the number's not going to be right. But the study basically said that when it comes to money, yes, you can be happier if you have more money, but you're not necessarily going to be. And really, at the point that you have enough to pay for your food, your lodging, your immediate needs, and maybe take a vacation, which at the time was about $70,000, that more money wasn't going to make you happier after that point. Now, there's a point where, I may not be able to buy happiness, but I can buy the yacht and park next to it and walk across. There's a little bit of that thinking, but the reality is that doesn't mean those people are happier. It just means they have more things. Because when they really studied happiness, people who were able to meet their basic needs, do what they needed to do, had enough to do those things. The next level of happiness was really more related to deeper relationships, better health, things that you can have with more money, but not the money themselves.
Got it.
the
So
money itself.
it's not the money, it's not the things, it's what the money allows you to do that gets that next level of happiness. Like that's I think an interesting thing, because I think, a lot of us believe, I mean, we're this is an entrepreneurship, this is a leadership podcast. We talk about success, and we talk about, and a lot of people will equate money with success. And I don't necessarily think that's wrong. It's not that the money is the success, it's that the money frequently comes as a result of the hard work that you put in. So is there an argument that, being successful can make you happier, not because of the money, that's not what I'm saying, but because of what what the money does for you? That makes sense.
It does. And I want to throw in a study, and I can't remember who did it off the top of my head. I should know this by now. But it's a study on it was a longitudinal study, which means it was took place over a long period of time. And they were studying men who were nearing the end of their life. And they asked the men a series of questions, and then they developed a scale of their personal well-being. And what that showed was that it didn't matter how successful you were monetarily. It didn't matter how long you lived necessarily. It didn't matter, of all the things you think about, healthy, all of that mattered a little bit. But what mattered a lot, and pretty much the only thing that mattered, was the quality of the relationships you had with other people. So if you look at money as being something that you can utilize to develop more deeper relationships with others, whether it's through, vacation with your children, not working all the time, not scrambling, being able to actually engage in relationships with your friends, which I do think that money provides, then yes, money can be a tool for happiness. But if the pursuit of money itself and the acquisition of money itself is actually kind of shown to be the opposite. Because if you're not utilizing it for what truly will enrich your life, you're just collecting money, and that money in and of itself has no happiness to it. It might have security, which is necessary for a lot of people, but it doesn't have that next level drive of, I'm truly happier because I have more stuff. It's the having a lot of stuff and no one to share it with. You want the people to share it with. That's the goal.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Because it's like you've heard in stories and in literature over and over about how, you get excited about the money, you get into the things, and then the things ultimately are not what people want out of life when it comes down to it. And I think that it's not an easy thing to necessarily show people that, that these things are not necessarily related, because like you said, like the money isn't the reason people are happy. But a lot of times the people who are happy have money. And that's something that we deal with, especially in the business that we're in, is people are showcasing their lifestyle. They're showing that they're successful. But I think the point that we're trying to make here is that it's not that the money makes you happy, but it's actually that the people working on themselves leads to that skill of being able to be happy. And then that leads to something different and more, and possibly like greater success.
One of the things that bothered me early about working on Success Magazine was that it all seemed to be about the money. But when it came down to it, my personal values are not, don't get me wrong, I'm what virtually anybody would call a successful human being in terms of everything, monetary gain and stuff but that was not my driver in life. My driver was never the accumulation of money. And I think that what bothered me about Success Magazine, a lot of it was about how to get more money. And I know that just as like we know a lot of people that are happy because they have more money, we know a lot of people that are really, really unhappy who have a lot of money. And, yes, Hollywood and our bloggers and all that stuff like to highlight that. But money in and of itself is not genuinely what makes people happy. It's what you do with it, like anything else. Relationships are everything. And all of the studies show it. One of the unique things about relationships, and this is one of the things I think we lost in the pandemic, is being eye to eye with somebody, being in a relationship where you're sitting in a cafe and you're having a conversation. It actually raises your oxytocin, which is the positive hormone, to be in a positive conversation with someone when they're in the room, in a way that it doesn't when it's over social media or where it's over video screen. We lost that. And by the same token, negative interactions produce cortisol. So we want to avoid those. And naturally, we try and avoid them as much as we can. They're a necessary part of life sometimes. But what oxytocin does, if I'm sitting with you and we're sitting in a cafe, and this is from Barbara Fredrickson's book, Love 2.0, and we see somebody riding a pink bicycle backwards with a monkey on their shoulder out of the window, and you and I don't even know each other, and we both laugh, but we notice the other one laughed. That's a micro moment where we're actually building trust between each other, even though we don't know each other, because both of our oxytocin levels are up. It's really remarkable how the human body works when it's surrounded by other human bodies. So I think that's why it always comes back down to, what are your relationships like? What are they like with your family? What are they like at home? What are they like in the office? What are they like in business? Trust, depth of relationship, it's all critically important to our happiness. And, more and more we're discovering happiness is critically important to our success in life.
I think that is a statement we can all get behind. What do you do next? Okay. We've talked about a lot of great ideas. We've talked about like mindset and specific things that people can do. What advice would you give somebody who says, okay, I like everything that I've heard. Now what?
Well, I want to tell a story first before we wind up. So there's this little boy, and his name is Garami, and he was born in Tibet, and he was born blind. And in that culture, if you're born blind, it means that the gods basically have frowned on you, or you're being punished for something from a past life, or your parents are being punished or something like that. But when you talk to this boy, he'll tell you he's the luckiest person in his village. And you ask him why he's happy, he'll say, I'm happy because I'm blind, which is a bizarre thought. But it turns out there's another young woman, a German woman, who went blind by the age of 12 and actually developed a Braille language for the language he spoke. It didn't exist before her. She was only 22 when she developed this language. She developed the language. She opened a school for the blind in his community. He went there. So she created this opportunity for him. He's the only one in his community that can read and write, and he's the only one that has access to a computer. So in his mind, I'm blind, and that makes me lucky because I get all of this stuff that other people don't get, and I'm happy. He's the only one who can read and write in his family. He's the only one in the village who can speak 3 languages, and the only one who gets to work on the internet. In his mind, I'm lucky. We should all be so lucky, right? To understand what we've been given and to understand the joys of where we are. And I think we spend a lot of time wallowing in what's wrong. But what the studies show us is that some of the key things towards living longer is having hope, is having a positive outlook. There was a great study by a neuroscientist on hope, and people who have hope have longer telomeres. Those are those little genes that determine how long you're going to live, sort of. I mean, they don't keep the bus from coming down the road that you step in front of, but in general, they tell you how long you're going to live from natural causes. They're longer in people who are more hopeful than they are in people who aren't at the same age. And the other thing is people who are happy have the better opportunity to overcome challenges. So we know there's challenges in business. We know there's challenges in life. I mean, we fail all the time. We see challenges in front of us that seem just insurmountable. But building your resilience, having that outlook that, you know what, that may have gone wrong, but I'm lucky because. And I think you'll find very few people listening to this podcast who aren't lucky because of something. Build your resilience, list your wins. They power you through the next thing. It really is important to focus on, people are reluctant, as you know, to focus on themselves. But focus on yourself through this with the idea that if I do this better, I'll have better relationships with my family, my community, the people I work with will be able to get more done, and it's more beneficial for them. So that's really where we want people to go. Work on yourself so that you're working on your workplace, your community, your family, and we're bringing it all together. But we are in a world that is filled with negative things bombarding us all the time. So pick something, work on one thing, figure out what it is. We have some great resources for you. Go to livehappy.com. One other thing we probably need to cover, because this is being released right at the International Day of Happiness. That's March 20th.
That's right. We were talking about happiness, and we kind of got into happiness, but yeah, tell us what is the International Day of Happiness?
So the United Nations in 2012 declared the March 20th to be the International Day of Happiness. The Kingdom of Bhutan recommended it. They were using as their travel campaign, come see the happiest country in the world, which they're not the happiest country in the world, but they're pretty far up there. Come visit us. That was their travel campaign. So they went to the United Nations and got March 20th declared the International Day of Happiness. That was about the time we were starting to Live Happy. We grabbed onto that. And, Jeff spoke at the United Nations once on happiness. I spoke at the United Nations on happiness. Really about people understanding that this is a good thing for not just individuals, but for the population. And we started a program, and we do it to this day. We've done it for 10 years in a row, and it's called our Happy Acts campaign. In fact, I just ran into somebody last weekend, a gentleman named Oscar. We were in Mexico together with him, Dave, if you remember. He's done 10,000 happy acts.
Wow.
10,000. And he keeps a journal of them. He writes them down every day. It's phenomenal. But we do this Happy Acts campaign in the month of March. We call it a social intervention campaign. And what we're trying to do is get people to stop for a moment and do intentionally, with intention, something good for somebody else. You've always heard about the pass it on Starbucks coffee line. That's great. That's a good thing, opening a door. I find more meaningful writing a thank you note, reaching out to somebody who you haven't talked to in a long time and just saying, how are you doing? What's going on in your life? Do something to make the world a happier place by reaching out to another human being and doing a happy act. You could also pick up litter or, volunteer at the animal shelter, whatever it is you want to do. But the goal here is to get as many people doing as many happy acts as possible. It's important you do them with intention, not just, oh, I said thank you this morning, I'm going to count that. No, that's not what we mean. You have to count it at the moment that you're doing it. And by the way, when you do something good for somebody else, all the studies show that you feel better than the person you did something good for feels. It's just where we're wired. We're selfish, even in our happiness. Yay, I did something for somebody else. Pat yourself on the back, but you feel good about it. But what we ask people to do is not only do happy acts, but go to our virtual wall, which is at livehappy.com/wall, and post that you saw somebody else do something, post that you did something, share happy acts ideas, share anything that makes you happy. And if you're posting on social media, all you need to do is hashtag happy acts. That's happy ACTS. Hashtag it. It's going to populate to our virtual wall. So we try and get as many posts from as many countries around the world as we can. We also do walls in person. We've done more than 3,000 walls in elementary, middle, and junior high schools alone in the United States. And we've had happiness walls in 40 countries. But our goal really is just to get as many people as possible to do something to make the world a happier place in March and tell us about it so that hopefully they inspire their community and their friends to do the same.
That's awesome. Happy acts. And, but doing it with intention. I love it. I love that you're like, you've got to be thinking of it, which goes right into what you were saying earlier. Like you have to make these choices intentionally in order to get the results. And so what a great way, what an easy way to do it. But to get that, to start that process of learning to be happier. This whole concept is amazing to me. I think it's just absolutely awesome. What an inspirational discussion. Thanks so much for being on here with us. This is, man, what a great episode. I think we're getting a lot of great feedback on this one. Can't wait for everybody to listen and get used to this.
Well, it's a joy. It's a joy to me to be able to talk about happiness, because for me, when I discovered it, was like this personal discovery. Like, I didn't understand that other people weren't wired like I was. Like, I'm wired for challenge. I'm wired to I can't hit a baseball, but man, I'm going to get up to bat every single time and swing. I am wired to take risks. And it was really, just really revealing to me to discover that other people aren't. and then discovered that they could be a little more wired that way. And, it really, so to me, it's a tool that if people just knew about it and that they had control. It's so awesome. I just love the idea of people taking action in their own lives to get what they want out of life. It's a great thing.
It is a great thing, and lucky to have you at the helm of Live Happy, and also being part of our podcast here. Thank you so much, Deb, for jumping on and talking about this. This has been absolutely wonderful. Appreciate it, Deb. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Dave. Always fun.
Always fun.
That was Neora's Dave Fleming talking with co-CEO Deborah Heisz about Neora's sister company, Live Happy, and how you can use happiness as a business tool. Be sure and visit livehappy.com/wall to share on the International Day of Happiness on March 20th. And be sure to join us for our next episode, going live on April 2nd, as Neora's co-founder Jeff Olson talks with author and renowned real estate broker Ricky Carruth. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if this is your first time of listening to Built to Win, we invite you to go back and listen to our story from the beginning. You can find us wherever you download your favorite podcasts. And while you're getting to know us, be sure to rate us and leave a review to let us know what you think of the show.